You all know how much I like curling up in a car while waiting for family, or in a corner of the house watching a bit of sneaky Netflix and so forth, with my phone or tablet and enjoying stereo sound to my lug holes without shutting myself off from the world completely. Maybe I'm just weird, of course. Anyway, my reference phone for this has been the Marshall London here. Yet this has gradually become outdated in so many ways. It's now so slow in 2017 with current Android apps and services. But take the idea of superlative phone speakers and transplant them into a premium metal frame with larger 5.2-inch 1080p AMOLED display. Now add a fingerprint scanner, add a much more modern Snapdragon 617 chipset, an extra gigabyte of RAM, a larger battery, a much better camera, add USB Type-C data and charging with Qualcomm Quick Charge 2.0, and heck, double the internal storage to 32 gigabyte and make it cheaper to buy. Wow! This is the ZTE Axon 7 Mini, which I got from Amazon UK, from the official ZTE importer. Don't expect to find this necessarily on your high street yet. One slight disappointment is that the stereo speakers, described by other reviewers as the loudest and best sounding in the phone world, aren't quite. Granted, the speakers are loud enough and the built-in Dolby Atmos audio processing does a good job at massaging the native EQ. Plus it adds extra stereo widening and reverb to deliver an audio image that's surprisingly cinematic. But the Axon 7 speakers don't have quite the bass of the London, as I shall show. Let's try for a demo. You'll be experiencing the volume and quality through the microphones, the stereo microphones of the Nokia 808 PureView shooting this, and through your own video playback setup, admittedly, but you'll still get a good sense of what the Axon 7 Mini delivers. Here's a bit of the excellent BBC Ibiza prom from the Royal Albert Hall. Full volume on the Axon 7 Mini. Great stereo image, great ambience, not that much bass. Now on the Marshall London. Here we go, full volume on the London. Definitely more bottom end. If not quite such a shimmery top end. Again, back on the Axon, just for comparison. So it may not quite deliver the same punch, but it's still pretty good. If you include the Atmos processing, then the speakers here are better than in the iPhone 7, Nexus 6P and many other stereo speaker flagships. But the Marshall London keeps its crown overall. Of course, it's outgunned completely in every other area. Of course, I'm just saying. That aside, the Axon 7 Mini shines as another in the same class as the Honor 6X and the brand new Moto G5 Plus. This is at the £250 or so sweet spot too. Not too much, not too little, with a premium metal shell on the back with antenna bands, plus tough metal effect plastic speaker grills on the front, under which are probably more extra RF antennae. The metal finish here is deliberately textured as opposed to polished, which is good. So rather than the Axon 7 Mini slipping out of your hands, this one does actually, well, it grips better than most. And if you still have an issue, then ZTE ships a cheap and clear TPU case in the box, which is a lovely touch, even if you might still end up buying a more expensive Cruiserlight Bug Droid or so on version eventually. The AMOLED display here isn't the brightest ever, but it's perfectly bright enough for me. Plus, keeping it in bounds should save power, won't it? I also did like the 2.5D curvature on the screen edges. Always a nice touch to keep gestures smooth and intuitive. On the back is a typical mid-range 2017 phone camera, which means it's pretty darn good in anything other than low light, with a 16 megapixel Samsung ISOCELL sensor and f/1.9 aperture. In low light, there's a tendency to use long shutter times despite not having OIS. If you have a steady hand, then you can get some usable photos from this. There's a two-tone dual LED flash tube plus phase detection autofocus. Video capture tops out at 1080p and is unstabilized. You'd have thought that these modern chipsets would have helped out with basic stabilization by now. Stereo microphones left and right here are great to see, and they coped well with high input volumes. So you can have a crack at live music filming down your local pub, though the lack of stabilization for the picture might spoil things somewhat. The fingerprint sensor is fast, and there are some extra features such as quick launching specific applications for a specific finger, if you can remember which is which. I liked being able to answer an incoming phone call, hello, with a tap rather than having to juggle swiping on the phone screen to do so, as you normally have to do. Down at the bottom, it's great to see USB Type-C, the future for data and quick charging. Many competitors in this mid-range still use the old micro USB, so well done, the ZTE here. Up top is a 3.5mm headphone jack, and I'm going to keep shouting that this is a positive feature as long as possible. I think this jack's dropping on some flagships is a premature misstep. Headphone output is top-notch too, just as with the speakers. There are definite audio smarts under the hood here, and there's loads to fiddle with in terms of surround effect, volume leveling, EQ tweaking, and much, much more. Although Android 7 hadn't hit this review handset yet, there's a light me favour UI 4.0 skin, and doubtless not that much will change in terms of interface when the update happens anyway. Like many Chinese skins, there's no app drawer by default, and everything lives on the home screens, iPhone style, but this never bothers me. And you can always install a Google Now launcher, as here, and then you're essentially back to near stock Android anyway, with more standard icons and just some ZTE applications to live with or replace. The only item of bloat is WPS Office, and this can be uninstalled. The Axon 7 Mini isn't lightning fast at any stage. This is the Snapdragon 617 after all, not an 800 series chipset, but it's also no slouch, and I had no show-stopping holdups. By default, there's the usual Chinese aggressive power management on an app-by-app level, but this is all tweakable in settings, and you can set your favourites to be left alone. For others, you can set them to be killed when the screen's locked, to be only allowed to wake up every now and then, and so on. Such fiddling is required, but it's flexible and workable. The only real interface gimmick here, thankfully, is MiPop, an on-screen alternative for the Android virtual controls. These can be dismissed on demand anyway, as here, Windows Phone style, but with MiPop on screen, then in theory you can have maximum screen content all the time. In practice, swiping on the MiPop icon to get the controls was sometimes rather fiddly. Plus the icon is ugly and often in the way, so I switched it off again. You can use this with 2 nano SIMs, though the usual configuration is micro SD and 1 SIM as here, adding to the 32GB of internal storage, of which 20GB is available out of the box. There are some internals that do disappoint, however. Battery life from the 2705 mAh Seal cell isn't great under Android 6 here. I was out of power by early evening. Not helped by me dipping into video playback with the Dolby Atmos processing, no doubt, but I'll still be glad when Android 7 arrives, which apparently improves things significantly. I was disappointed also that there's no support yet for 5 GHz Wi-Fi, something of a staple in our house, so it was back to good old legacy 2.4 GHz connections. The chipset does support the higher frequency. It's weird. Maybe this too is something that Android 7 and new firmware will bring. Overall, though, this is a thumbs up from me. I had to get mine from Amazon, as I say. ZTE's larger 5.5-inch screen Axon 7 is harder to find still, while the Mini only loses in a few spec points, chipset and camera, yet keeps the great audio all round. A damn fine mid-range all-rounder that carries on flying the flag for good smartphone sound and should serve anyone well into 2018 and beyond. This is the ZTE Axon 7 Mini.